Okay, welcome to the March 16th, 2023 California Board of Behavioral Sciences Telehealth Committee meeting. My name is Chris Jones, chairperson of the committee. Before we convene, I would like to remind everyone present that the board is a consumer protection agency charged with administering and enforcing the board's laws. Where protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. Board of Behavioral Sciences will be holding this public meeting in person and via WebEx platform. I will announce when we are accepting public comment on the various issues. For each public comment period, we will first be accepting comments from the participants in the audience. Well, there's no one in the audience today.
Sorry about that.
The moderator will open the lines as appropriate so that our remote audience members can comment. Each commenter will have 2 minutes to comment. Moderator, would you please provide the audience instructions on how they may participate during the meeting at the appropriate times?
Certainly. When the time comes to ask for public comment, we will open up the WebEx Q&A feature. You will see a question mark icon in the lower right of your WebEx screen, or if you're on a mobile device, behind the 3-dot other options. If you click on the question mark, you'll see a text box. You can type the word comment and click send. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. The other option is to raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, and we will display this screen with instructions each time we open for public comment.
Thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Members, during the roll call, please introduce yourself and let the public know whether you are a public or a licensed member. Christina, please call roll to establish a quorum.
Good morning. Chris Jones.
Here, chairperson and LEP member.
Susan Friedman.
Here, public member.
Kelly Ranasinghe.
Here, public member.
We have a quorum.
And thank you, Christina. Before we begin, I would like to remind all speakers to remain on topic when making comments on the agenda items. The first agenda item are introductions. This is the time that staff and public participants can introduce themselves. Introductions are voluntary for members of the public. Staff, please introduce yourselves.
I'll start. I'm Steve Sodergren, a Board of Behavioral Sciences Executive Officer. Marlon?
Good morning. I am Marlon McManus. I am the Assistant Executive Officer.
Good morning, Roseanne Helms. I am the Legislative Manager for the board.
Hi, Christy Berger, Regulatory Analyst for the board.
I'm Christina Kitamura, the Administrative Analyst for the board.
And Sabina Knight, Legal Counsel for the board.
Thank you. Are there any members in the audience that would like to introduce themselves?
I do see a raised hand from someone logged into WebEx as Kathy Atkins. Kathy, I sent you a request to unmute your microphone. You're unmuted.
Everyone, this is Kathy Atkins, the Deputy Executive Director with CAMP. Thanks for having us with CAMP. Sorry if I didn't mention that.
Thank you. And we also have a raised hand from someone logged into WebEx as Ben Caldwell. Ben, I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone. You're unmuted.
LMFT.
All right. Thank you, Ben. And I do not see any other hands raised for introductions.
All right. Thank you, moderator.
Oops. My apologies. We did get one more. Attendee logged in as Stephanie Gabler. Stephanie, I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone. And Stephanie, you should see a pop-up come up saying unmute me. Okay, Stephanie may be having audio issues. We also have a request to speak from someone logged in as Rebecca Gonzalez. Rebecca, here's Stephanie. Stephanie, you're unmuted. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you to the licensing board, the BBS. My name is Stephanie Gabler. I'm a California licensed marriage and family therapist. So just wanted to say hello. I used to go in person when the meetings were in person. So grateful that I could be here for today. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And then Rebecca Gonzalez, I'm going to send you a request to unmute. You're unmuted. Rebecca, go ahead. All right, we're not hearing your voice, Rebecca. My apologies, Rebecca is unmuted. Let's see. Oh, and you've muted yourself again. Let me try one more time. You're unmuted, Rebecca. All right, Rebecca's having audio issues as well. Our apologies. And Jennifer McKinnon, I'm going to send you a request to unmute. Jennifer, you're unmuted.
Jennifer McKinnon, Pacific Clinics Associate Director. Thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Wonderful, you're welcome. And Rebecca, we have put some instructions on the screen, although I do see you are connected through your cell phone. I've sent you one more request and one more attempt. And it seems that Rebecca may need to utilize the Q&A in future portions of the meeting if she wishes to contribute, but at this point, that's all the introductions we have requests for.
All right, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda is the consent calendar, discussion and possible approval of the December 8th, 2022 committee meeting minutes. It's agenda item 3. Do the board members have any suggested amendments, or should the minutes be approved? Susan?
I move for approval of the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second, and no discussion and no corrections.
Thank you, Kelly. Seeing that we have a motion to approve the minutes, I would now like to see if there are any comments from the public.
And this is the moderator. We are opening up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If you would like to make a comment, you can look for the question mark icon, typically in the lower right of your computer screen, or behind the 3-dot other options if you are on a mobile device. Or our call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand to ask to be recognized. And any computer login person can look for their hand logo, typically at the bottom of your WebEx screen. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. Are there any comments on the minutes? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close public comment?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Okay, so it looks like we have a motion to approve the December 8th, 2022 committee meeting minutes. Christina, can you please take the roll call vote?
Yes. Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you, Christina. All right, next on our agenda is the overview of committees' roles and tasks, agenda item number 4. Roseanne, would you provide us with an overview, please?
Sure, thanks, Chris. So we're continuing our discussion at our telehealth committee today. We've had this committee going for a couple of years. It's made a lot of of good progress toward clarifying our laws regarding telehealth via several bills. The most recent is running right now, the temporary practice allowance bill proposal that's running as AB 232 currently this legislative session. And then in attachment A, you can kind of see at the beginning what issues were identified for the telehealth committee to tackle. We've tackled a lot of them. We have a few we're still working on, including a best practices document, examining newer delivery methods of therapy being offered and online therapy sites. We're going to be continuing some discussion and work on that today and throughout a couple of the next meetings. We're going to discuss at an upcoming meeting, we're going to be discussing interstate compacts. And today we're going to also continue our discussion of license, display of a license or registration. So that is the brief update on where we've been and where we're going.
Thank you, Roseanne. Are there any questions or comments from board members? Nope. Okay, excellent. Are there any comments from those in the audience?
And this is the moderator. And again, we are opening up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, look for the question mark icon and type the word comment into the text box and click send, or raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. And if you are a call-in user, you may press *3 to raise your hand. Are there any comments? I do not see any requests for comments. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Our next agenda item is discussion and possible recommendation regarding online only therapy platforms and other alternative modes of therapy. This is agenda item number 5. Roseanne, would you again please provide us with an overview?
Sure. So at our last telehealth committee meeting this past December, we had a pretty in-depth discussion about the emergence of online only therapy platforms. And if that represented any new public protection concerns or things that the board needed to look out for or maybe modify the law for, and also what methods these platforms are using rather than traditional in-person face-to-face therapy. They're using video conferencing. Some of them might be also providing services via an app, providing services via texting or email or another method. And so we wanted to find out a little bit more information about that and have a discussion. And so what the committee directed staff to do at that last meeting was a couple of things. We were directed to draft a survey to obtain feedback from therapists who have worked for online only therapy platforms to kind of get their experiences with how it's been working, how they provided services, what sort of safety measures are in place and things like that. So we have drafted a survey in attachment A that I'd like to discuss today. We have not sent it out yet. We want to make sure that all of the survey covers all of the committee's concerns and is asking all the right questions. So that we can send out the most complete survey possible. I have also reached out to stakeholders to get their feedback on the survey prior to this meeting and have done that as well. So we want to kind of have you guys look at the final draft before it goes out to the public or to the therapists who have worked for one of these platforms. The second thing that the telehealth committee wanted to know is that what are the legislature's concerns with these online only therapy platforms? Does the legislature have any concerns? Have they been looking into the issue? How are they feeling about what, if anything, needs to be done? So Steve and I reached out to the staff representatives at the Assembly and Senate Business and Professions Committee. These are the two committees at the legislature that the board falls under their jurisdiction. And so we met with their staff that are assigned to board issues and discussed what the work of the telehealth committee is doing with this, how we're doing a survey. We relayed information about how the committee has some concerns about texting, and we kind of relayed our consumer education efforts that we were planning to do. The committee at the Business and Professions they were really grateful for that information. They were interested in what the board's doing with the survey. They indicated they've heard some concerns here and there, but they have not really heard a lot of specific concerns or complaints yet. So it's sort of on their radar, but they aren't seeing it as a major. They're not seeing any major emerging trends of problems yet. So they're kind of in my takeaway from that was they're kind of in a monitoring phase. They're interested, but they're kind of, looking to see what problems emerge. So that's sort of where we're at. I'd like to continue our discussion today and also look at the proposed survey to see if the committee is comfortable having that sent out to stakeholders who are working for these platforms. Thank you.
Susan?
I just want to mention that I actually had my interview with the Senate Rules Committee, and two things came up, which I don't know how we deal with. One of them was they asked me a lot about texting. They seem to feel, rightly so, that a lot of young people text all the time, and they were wondering why we were not so happy about texting. And the second thing is kind of unbelievable, but at the very last minute, someone ran into the room and said, "Have you considered chatbot and AI, and what are you doing about that?" And I said, "Well, that's just come up in the news in the last day or so, so we haven't had a meeting. We haven't had a chance to discuss it." But I thought I should just mention that because they asked about it.
Thank you, Susan. Kelly, do you have anything?
No, Roseanne, I've been through the survey. I think it's really good, particularly the confidentiality provisions. I would note, I follow a lot of the therapist trends on TikTok, and one of the emerging issues is therapists kind of conducting these quasi-therapeutic discussions in a non-confidential environment when they're using therapeutic techniques. So I think the survey really goes to that. And I think the section, particularly the qualitative sections where therapists are allowed to speak about some of their positive or negative issues is really good. So I think it was a really well-constructed survey, Roseanne. And, as usual, great job.
Thanks for that, Kelly.
I agree with Kelly. Roseanne, I thought it was very thorough. I thought it hit all of the concerns that we had that we discussed at the last meeting. It was very, very broad. I think it gives the people who are going to be taking the survey an opportunity to not just click a box, but have some narrative so that we can get some more detailed feedback and give us some direction on how to move forward. So thank you. It was great. It looks great. Are there any comments from those in the audience?
Let's see. Yes, I see. We do have a comment. Did you want me to go ahead and open up the Q&A feature for public comment? Okay, thank you. So we've opened up the Q&A section. If you'd like to make a comment via that way, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment into the text box and click send, or anyone may raise their hand, and our calling users can press *3 to raise their hand. We do have a request for comment from someone logged in as Ben Caldwell. And Ben, I'm sending you a request to unmute. You're unmuted.
Thank you, and I want to second the praise for this survey, Roseanne. This is really well put together. It's comprehensive. It seems like it hits on the key areas really, really well. My only question about this was, I don't know whether this is within the scope of the board's functions or even necessarily how you might capture this, but we've seen recent media coverage of some of these companies reaching significant settlements with the FTC about handling consumer data, and in particular, some of their privacy practices allowing them to share consumers' mental health care information with other companies like Facebook, who are paying for that data. And so I was curious. Again, I don't know if this fits in with the sort of scope of the board's responsibilities or how it might fit into the survey. But I wondered if there was any concern about potential liability for clinicians in that kind of data sharing, or if it's sort of the relationship between the consumer with the app and whether the board would just sort of take a hands-off approach. Thank you.
And we have a request for comment from calling user 7. And I'm going to send you a request to unmute, but you can also press *6 to unmute from your phone. And you're unmuted.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. My name is Michael Levy. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, both in private practice in California and as a employee assistance program staff person and clinician for Sharp Healthcare in San Diego. I wanted to make a couple of brief comments. The first one regarding reference to interest and questions about the use of text in providing mental health services, and I have some experience to offer in that. And the second item I wanted to talk about was some of the fiscal implications for therapists in California that are also part of or impacted by the online platforms that we're discussing today. To first address the question of texting, in a previous period of employment with a corporate employee assistance program employer and insurance company, the company was asked to provide text-based services to several accounts and made a good faith attempt to do so properly and in a clinically appropriate manner. And I had some experience providing those services and supervising staff providing those services. Just again to contribute briefly to the discussion, one of the things that I observed was that because of the nature and culture around texting, that often what we might consider sessions that were being conducted that way
2 minutes.
were.
And our next request for comment is from Kathy Atkins. Kathy, I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone. You're unmuted.
Hi, thank you. These are just comments as I was reading it, we were reading it, that came to mind, and we're not advocating as much as just food for thought. And before I read those, Ben Caldwell's comment, just as an aside, we've been receiving more and more inquiries at CAMP along the lines of Ben's question, just, food, fodder. If these are in there and somehow we missed it, my apologies. Questions about 1099 versus W-2 was one that came up. Question about training on sort of jurisdictional or states' laws. What do they train or advise on things such as, child abuse reporting or those kinds of things that can differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Did the BBS have any desire specific along the same lines to training or coursework or credentialing? And then last, one of the folks who assessed it put the question that she thought, question 21, about online therapy platform and custodian of record was confusing, and that there was a concern that stakeholders might not completely understand sort of what the question meant or the intent. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
And I do not see any other requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, moderator, thank you.
You're welcome. Apparently, my apologies, calling user 7 would like to continue. Would that be acceptable?
As long as calling number 7, if he understands that the purpose of this discussion is to comment on the survey itself and not to bring up issues that are related to his own experiences. So if he's got feedback about the survey questions, then he's more than welcome to chime in again.
And additionally, I'd like to offer, we probably want to get in touch. We could actually have a side conversation with him. So I'll probably try to get in touch if he wants to offer, or I can offer my email address for him. So
sure.
Okay, calling user 7, you're unmuted.
I would appreciate that and respect the limits of the discussion. Apologies if I was off topic, and I will pass for the remainder of the comment period at this time.
If you like Steve said, if you'd like to have a deeper discussion about some of the concerns, we can provide you with his contact information, and you'd be more than welcome to do that.
I'd appreciate that opportunity.
And can I clarify? Can I clarify? Are you a licensed clinical social worker?
Yes.
I think I have your contact information, so hopefully it's correct. But
Great.
mine, I will try to get in touch with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is the moderator with the reminder that the board's email address is at the bottom of the display screen as well. There are no further requests for public comment.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other comments from our board members, our committee members? Sorry. No, we're good. Okay. I was just trying to review question number 21 to see how the wording may be confusing. Roseanne, can you take a quick look at it and see kind of what you think?
Yeah, maybe we should use a different, I don't know if we could use a different term for custodian of records. It's basically trying to say, you know, if you're not the gatekeeper of the records, then would you be able to access it at a later time if you needed to?
Yeah. No, that's what my takeaway from it too.
I'm thinking maybe if there's a different one's not coming to mind, but maybe there's a different term for custodian of record.
No, I think that's the proper term for it.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. What about and maybe I need to ask Kathy. Maybe I need to ask Kathy. Maybe I should have asked her the question when she was on. Kathy, can you hop back on and give me some clarification as to what the concern is or about the 1099 versus a W-2 person and what the significance of that would be with regards to our survey? Moderator, would you open up Kathy Atkins' mic?
Certainly, one moment. And Kathy, I sent your request to unmute. You're unmuted.
Hi, thank you. For question 21, I've already forwarded the question to both Steve and Roseanne so that you can look at it. It's kind of lengthy, so I didn't want to take the committee's time, but you have it to just look at. As for the 1099 and W-2, again, it's just for consideration. It's just as different things come up as we get complaints and concerns raised about this quote unquote new, you know, it's not super new, but it's new in the sense it's becoming so large. We have questions about sort of the legality and issues that surround how the providers are classified. And while I don't believe it's the board's, I don't believe the board believes it's their jurisdiction to resolve any labor disputes. You know, that to me, again, this is just CAMF. You know, we get so many questions about it. We'd be curious what those statistics are as we get lots of questions, and there are concerns about, you know, whether people are being classified unlawfully or, you know, what kind of situations or positions does that put the provider, given sort of the labor laws surrounding it? Again, these are just food for thought as the BBS puts this out, since it is surrounding these online platforms. So I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate it. So Roseanne, I guess my question then would be, would it be possible, because the survey I believe is really thorough and it covers all the things that we talked about. Being that we're asking for narrative, would there be like, could you put a box down at the bottom of the survey that would allow additional comments that or concerns that people may have as kind of a catch-all, or will that be just overwhelming?
We actually have a catch-all question at the very end. Well, it kind of, let me see how exactly it's worded. It's, do you have any other comments or concerns you would like to share in general? I'm wondering if it would be helpful, maybe just because we're doing kind of a general inventory of like all of the issues surrounding it, if it would be helpful to just, if we could just add a box, you know, asking about the how they're paid, 1099 or W-2. Maybe we could get that question from CAMP, and also the question about the settlements and consumer data. I'm not sure how those two suggestions would be worded, but I would be open to, you know, including those questions if they were provided by the stakeholders.
Okay. I think that that's fair.
Chair Jones?
Yeah, yes, Kelly.
I think it's an interesting question. It's very much like the FedEx litigation, where FedEx had a bunch of independent, employees kind of masquerading as independent contractors. It's kind of on the fringes of the BBS's jurisdiction, but it's interesting in the sense that if a therapist is acting as an independent contractor, then liability sort of flows to the therapist. But if a therapist is acting as an employee under a W-2, then there's some vicarious liability from the platforms, and then it does kind of impugn the BBS's inquiry for public protection. So, that's all I'd mention.
Well, that makes sense. Okay. So then would we be I'm sorry, any other comments from you guys? Committee members? We're okay. Susan, we're okay? Okay. So then at this point, we would look at wanting to make a motion to move this forward. So I may need Sabina's wordsmithing powers to help with this. I would assume that it would be the motion would include making the proposed changes and getting the questions from stakeholders. Is that correct?
Yeah, what I would ask is that that Kathy and Ben respectively regarding the 1099 question and the settlement liability, craft a question and email it to me. And then we'll include it in the survey. I think it has some value too for what the even though it's not directly related to the board, it may help the legislature as well in the future. So I would say that ask them to draft those two questions, and if they are inclined to, and then approve the survey to send out to stakeholders.
Okay. Sabina, can you help us?
More Sorry, we have one more guest in the audience, Rebecca Gonzalez, it appears, that has her hand up. Do you want to take her comment?
Oh, yes, if she's, yeah, please.
Okay, Rebecca, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. You're unmuted.
Hi, this is Rebecca Gonzalez from NASW California. I called in on my phone now, so hopefully this is working. I do think the 1099 question is a good one. I am just a little concerned about people honestly answering that question, because there might be a fear that the way that they are working as an independent contractor might not be legal. So I don't know how to craft the question, but it's just a sensitivity to that issue and people's fear that they're not following the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. All right.
And we have one additional request for comment from someone logged in as Betsy Bloombaum. Is that of interest?
Sure.
Okay, Betsy, I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone. You're unmuted.
Thank you. My question is about this recent mandatory telehealth CEU.
Betsy, can I pause you?
Yes.
This is specifically about the survey. If there's other questions that you have that aren't on the agenda, there's a section for us to do that later on in the meeting.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are we ready to move forward? Sabina, can you help us with a motion?
Of course, your motion will include directing staff to update those questions as discussed and to reach out to the stakeholders to obtain that input on those particular questions that Roseanne mentioned, and then proceed with implementing the survey to the licensee population.
Okay, then I will make a motion to direct staff to move forward with the survey, including the questions from the stakeholders to add to the survey, and then move forward with putting the survey out.
I would second.
All right. Discussion? Any comments from the public?
This is the moderator, and we've opened up the WebEx Q&A to facilitate public comment. If you'd like to make a comment on the motion, you can look for the question mark icon, typically in the lower right of your WebEx screen. Click that once, type the word comment in the text box and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon. If you are on a mobile device, it may be behind the 3-dot other options, and our call-in users may press *3 to raise their hand. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. Are there any comments on the motion? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Any further comments from our committee members? Okay, Christina, can you call the roll?
Yes. Susan, were you available for the entire discussion?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then I'll take your vote. Susan Friedman?
Yes.
Chris Jones?
Yes.
Kelly Ranatingi?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Christina. All right, next on our agenda is the discussion and possible recommendation regarding Business and Professions Codes, sections 4980.31, 4980.44, 4989.48, 4996.7, 4996.8, and 4999.70, and the California Code of Regulations, Title 16, sections 1811 and 1815.5, The requirement of displaying of license or registration. This is agenda item number 6. Roseanne, would you give us an overview?
Yes. So right now, under current law, all registrants and licensees with the board receive a paper copy of their license and registration. This copy contains the person's name, their license number, the type of license it is, whether it's a marriage and family therapist license, a clinical social work license, etc. And then also the expiration date. The law requires right now that they display this license in a conspicuous place in their primary place of practice, and that's actually in the statute. The reason this is a requirement or was likely written that way is so that a client could see that their therapist actually had a license, so they could see the license when they physically came into the therapist's office. It would be displayed there so they could see all the license and all the information that's on it. Well, so now with the increased use of telehealth, the wording of that law raises some questions about whether it needs updating because a therapist's primary place of practice might be virtual. So if it makes it difficult or impossible for the physical piece of paper to be on display in a visible manner. So that's kind of the main point of the discussion today. Current law doesn't necessarily require all licensees and registrants to provide a license or registration number when they begin services with a client, and that's likely because the license was intended the way the law was previously written. It was assumed that therapy was in person. The license would be on display in the office. But there are a few things in law that require the license number to be provided right now. We do have our telehealth regulations, and every time a licensee initiates telehealth services with a client, they're required to provide the license number or registration number and the type of license registration. And additionally, we have some information or some requirements in our advertising regulations that all licensees and registrants, when they advertise, are required to display the license or registration number. So we discussed this issue at our previous telehealth committee in December, and the committee directed staff to draft language requiring the license or registration number and the expiration date to be provided to the client either verbally or written each time services are provided. So what I've done is in attachment B, I've drafted 2 different options for that requirement. They're basically the 2 different ways of saying the same thing for us to discuss today. I would note that if we select one of the options in attachment B, it is a change from what is in our telehealth regulations. So the telehealth regulations will eventually need to be updated and rewritten. The statute change will automatically override the telehealth regulation portion that says that the license and registration number needs to be provided only upon initiation of telehealth services. If we choose one of the options today that we've presented, it would change to being required every time services are provided. So just something to be aware of there. Some cleanup would be required for the future. Also, in looking at the law regarding display of license and registration, I had also noticed an out-of-date provision that's only in the LCSW Practice Act, that it requires that the current renewal receipt also be displayed near the license. That's not really necessary anymore. We send out a renewal certificate with the name, the license number, registration number, and the current expiration date every time somebody renews. So they don't need to have the renewal receipt actually displayed there. So I'm proposing that we delete that for the LCSW Practice Act. So that's pretty much what I wanted to discuss today is the proposed options shown in attachment B. Thank you.
Roseanne, do you have any comments from our committee members? Susan?
Well, I just think that's appropriate and it's fine. We have to get a new law or anything like that, or is it okay the way it is? You just get it amended or what? Roseanne?
So Yeah, so in attachment B, it would require a law change to update what the law currently says. So I've drafted two options just for the MFT Practice Act. We would draft the other license types once we decided on one. So there's an option 1 and an option 2 right now shown in attachment B. So I'm kind of curious which one everybody likes better, if either. So we'll go from there.
This is Kelly. I like option 1. And the reason is you don't have that notwithstanding subdivision A and then it goes back, because it seems to be, it hacks it all and it makes it a little bit more clear and it's an active voice. But I would like to hear what the chair thinks.
I mean, they're both kind of the same. I guess, my question would be, which one, will result in the most fluid practice. So, I mean, I didn't really see a huge difference in the two, other than the specification in option 2 about telehealth. So am I missing something, Roseanne, as far as like differences between option 1 and option 2?
No, they're really pretty much just two different ways of saying the exact same thing in my mind.
Okay. That was my takeaway also.
Yeah.
So I guess the simplest one would probably be the best option. Option 1 looks great to me.
Okay.
I would
Any
move we
other,
accept option 1.
One other thing I'd like to say about option 1, I would like to make one addition where it says in subsection A there, where it says display of the license or registration certificate in a conspicuous place. I would add the word current. I would say display of the current license or registration, just for extra clarity.
Okay. I may be going back on you, Kelly. I kind of like the detail in part B of option 2. I'm looking at it again for the 50th time. Okay. All right, let's get moderator, can we get comments from the public?
Certainly, we are opening up the WebEx Q&A feature to permit public comment. And if you would like to make a comment, you can look for the question mark icon in the lower right of your WebEx screen or behind the 3-dot other options if you're on a mobile device, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and our call-in users can use *3 to raise their hand. We have a request for comment from Ben Caldwell. Ben, I'm sending you a request to unmute.
Thank you, Ben Caldwell, MFT. Really appreciate the drafting of the language here. It seems to elegantly address the issue. Either one of those two options, they seem to have the same effect, but I would express a light preference for option 1, simply because it provides a more consistent standard that I think is going to be easier for folks to understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
And we have a request for comment from call-in user 6. I'm going to send you a request to unmute, and you will be able to press *6 to unmute as well. And call-in user 6, did you get your request?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
Yes, I'm Jonathan Kabat. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And my experience is that many of the apps are starting to have a waiting room area in which the...
Jonathan, can I pause you for a moment, please? We're having discussion regarding the change of language for the display of license. If you'd like to bring up another comment on a different subject, we have time for that at the end of the meeting.
I was just going to suggest that those licenses could be displayed at the initial onset. Thank you.
All right.
And we have one more request for comment from Kathy Atkins. Kathy, I'm sending you a request to unmute. You're unmuted.
Hi, Kathy Atkins with CAFT. Truthfully, I'm actually following suit to Ben Caldwell's comment. CAFT, we took a look at both. We don't see either being overly problematic or concerning, but when we kind of looked around and polled, I think there was a preference for number one, but again, there's no big concerns either way. So thank you. And thank you for tackling this issue.
Thank you, Kathy.
And I do not see any other requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, moderator, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other comments from committee members? Then I think we will move forward with a motion. One is fine with me. I mean, I don't think they're, like I said, they're both it's pretty much the same thing. So if people are liking one, then let's go with one. So then the motion would be to advise staff to move forward with the changing of the language using option one. Am I close?
Yes, move forward with making with option one, making the change in subdivision A to display the current license or registration, adding the word current. Move forward with option one, direct staff to make that change and any non-substantive changes, and to draft the language for each practice act and to bring to policy and advocacy committee for consideration.
That is the motion. I will move that. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other discussion? No from committee members. Moderator, any other discussion from the public?
And we're opening up the WebEx Q&A to facilitate public comment. If anyone has a comment on the motion, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or raise your hand by clicking on a hand icon. Are there any comments on the motion? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Christina, can you take the roll call vote?
Yes. Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ranasinghe,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you, Christina. Next on the agenda is discussion and possible recommendation regarding telehealth best practices guidance document. This is agenda item number 7. Steve, would you please provide us with an overview?
I would be happy to. So hold on, let me get this up here. So during our last December 8th meeting, we had discussed doing a best practices document, 2 best practice documents. One that would focus on the use of video conferencing for supervision, and another focusing on the general use of telehealth. So the goal, just to kind of remind you, the goal of the board's best practice document that we'd been discussing was to help employers and supervisors best assess acceptable work settings and conditions for telehealth, and to kind of clarify expectations for all parties when they're utilizing telehealth. So after additional review of the documents that we had and that we presented at the last meeting and doing additional research, I recognized it was really important for these documents to really focus on the board's telehealth practice standards that we find in regulation on 18.15.5. Those are kind of the guiding principles for telehealth that the board has. So we wanted to, I think it's important that we focus on that. Additionally, through my research, though, I found that there was a wealth of existing information out there that would actually help licensees and even consumers kind of navigate the ethical and technical sides and responsibilities of using telehealth or video supervision. So what eventually I have developed here are 3 separate guidance documents. They're meant to be short and sweet, but to basically present some considerations that everyone should take while venturing into telehealth, whether it's licensees or their employers or consumers. Each document consists of considerations, and those considerations were taken straight from our from the regulations, 18.15, the standards of practice for telehealth. And that kind of translates that into a 1-page sheet that will kind of assist people in, looking at what the board has, deemed essential for when you proceed into telehealth. Additionally, though, I know that it's pretty basic, so they're seeing some of the other documents out there and the guidance out there. We've included links to pertinent information. Not only do we put in links for current resources that the board has, also included links such as the links to the Code of Ethics for industry associations. Each one of those have some sort of guideline in there for either telehealth or using video for mental health services. And then additionally, I found some links for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's a great resource, I believe. The Health and Human Resources, they have dedicated a section. Well, it's a broad link to a broad telehealth guideline document, but they have specific for each type of profession, and there is one for telehealth and behavioral health care. And this is a step-by-step guide what somebody should consider when going into telehealth. And it's really, I think, an excellent resource. So we have the 3 documents here. We have one for if you are going to be providing telehealth in California, another for if you're thinking about providing video supervision, and additionally, the 3rd is for consumers. That was one that we hadn't thought about or hadn't really talked about before, but going through this, I think it's also very important to have that. And the idea is to put these into our FAQs and kind of promote them through social media. Additionally, the other thing going through this, which I didn't mention in my memo too, Kathy brought something up about this. We are looking, I think if there's ability, what I would like to do is actually look at providing at least links to other states, or seeing if we can get a comprehensive guide so our licensees, if they are going to be using telehealth, that they understand they could possibly have a link, an easier way to access what they need to know about in other states too. So what I have before you are the 3 documents, and just would like to get some comments. The recommendation is if you think they're good, we can proceed on, and then I will work with our DCA publications department to make them look nice and pretty. And then we'll find a place in FAQs to post them and promote them through the social media platforms. So comments.
Yeah, they look great, by the way, and I do really like the links you have to the additional resources. So it's not just PBS that's providing this information, but we're taking information from different entities. One of the questions that I have is, as far as distributing the information, would it make sense to possibly like require therapists that are using telehealth to put links on their websites like we do for the other things that we have to you know put on there for consumer protection so that consumers have that information? I'm just thinking of other ways to get that out to people.
No, that's a good concept. I don't know if we could. I don't know. That would definitely require a regulation, but we could encourage that. I mean, possibly. The other thought too is to make it, I know I proposed it to the FAQs right now, but also maybe just actually having a telehealth section on our website.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, and then working with, and maybe the associations would help out to promote it too. But I'll look into that though.
Okay. Susan?
Yeah, I think that it looks great, Steve, really great, except I have the same problem that we just talked about how to communicate this. And I think just listing it in the FAQs is not sufficient. I mean, if I were really going to do something, I might like mail it to them in snail mail, because if they get a letter, then they know from the board, they know I better open this up and I better read this, because we have no excuse me, guarantee that they're going to read it if it's on the website. We just don't know. But if obviously snail mail is probably too expensive to do. So if we're going to put it on the website, maybe we need to have something where they have to communicate somehow or other that they've read it, because just sticking it in the FAQs is not going to, they may never read it. They may never go there. They may never they don't want to take the time, probably. So we have to put it someplace where we know it's required reading, and see what response we get. But I don't know exactly how it would work on the website. Maybe you do.
Well, once again, these are just documents. We can't necessarily, I think, make them required to read. They are a resource for our licensees. They should be keeping updated on the laws and regulations alone. The one thing we did there, I was thinking about, we would possibly use these for, and we can do the same thing for possibly when people renew their license, or when they receive either a registration or they receive a actual license. We could send out an email with these documents on there. Additionally, I thought it was important where we can definitely, when people are coming in from out of state and getting an out of state, coming from out of state, definitely sending these over to them as we approve their licensure, so that they understand California laws. I think that's really important too. So I think the emailing, maybe at the time of renewal, we can definitely put out email blasts. Unfortunately, that's always been our biggest thing, is we put stuff out there, but you hope people read it. So it's the encouraging to read, even if you do like, the snail mail. I think it's that motivation to read. I think the one thing is just consistent, right now, using the social media or email blasts. I mean, on a consistent basis, if we really want something out there, is utilizing that in a way where it's frequent but not too, I guess, annoying, but keeping it out there, and we can kind of refresh that through social media. But also looking at the email possibility, when you get your license or when you're renewing, maybe we can do something like that.
I think all the things that you just mentioned are good. I think we need to do that. I mean, because we really need to make sure we've communicated it. And you're right, we don't want to annoy people, but we definitely want them to read it. But one other question I had, you mentioned that you also want to give them the information about other states. I object to that because when we looked at the other states, there are so many other things going on that if I were somebody and you gave me what's happening in 20 other states, I would not pay any attention to it because first of all, it doesn't apply to me. And secondly, it's very confusing because every state has a little bit different. It tweaks it a little bit differently. So I think that would be much too confusing.
No, and I agree with you. And the intent what the intent would be if we did something like that would not be to it would not be to say to it would just be a link, possibly it would be a link just to, here's the state's licensing licensing authority over there, and explaining to our licensees that if you are providing telehealth, it might be a good idea that you understand what the laws are over here. Not specifically pointing out the telehealth laws and stuff, but giving our licensees a direct connection where if they are thinking about practicing in Nevada, they can go to Nevada to make sure that they understand, what the laws are. But it would be just a matter of here's Nevada, go over there. Not necessarily here's the specific laws of Nevada. We don't have time or the thing, or time or the resources for that. But just kind of to start kind of reiterate for our licensees that it's important that you understand the legal requirements not only in California, but if you're doing telehealth, make sure you understand, that if you are providing services in another state, you better know those laws too. So,
Kelly?
Steve, first, I think they all look outstanding. I sort of focused on attachment C, which is the one which is sort of designed for consumers. The one thing I would say is that in the first 2 bullet points during your first session with your therapist and during any additional session with a therapist, I think it's not a will, it's a must. Because if the document is speaking to consumers, we want it to sort of read like a consumer document, and that would empower them to think about what their therapist must be doing versus will be doing. And then on the second bullet point in the second section, I think it's a should. So your therapist, will verify your full name and address of your present location, should consider whether the session is appropriate for telehealth, or maybe it's a must, actually. In any event, I think if you use the word must, the consumer or the peer will be thinking, oh, my therapist actually has to do that. And if he doesn't do that, that's a problem. And with regard to promulgation of attachment C, I would just ask that BBS promulgate it to, once it's formalized, to all of our peer groups, all of our consumer groups like NAMI, Mental Health America, DRC, Disability Resources California, because I think that's really going to get this document out to the people who are using telehealth, for instance, people who are disabled and can't exit their home, people who are having difficulty in rural communities accessing, local therapists. And other than that, I think it's a wonderful document, Steve. I think you really created some wonderful work here, and I think it's going to help and protect a lot of people.
Steve, do you have more? I don't know if you're muted or not.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
All right, Susan?
Yeah, I agree with it. I agree with every single thing that Kelly said, and I think it's really, really important for the consumers. But I have one question, and this may be the dumbest question of the day. But how does the therapist really verify where the person is, the address, where they are? The reason I'm asking is if something comes up that's really serious, like suicide, and they have to get somebody really quickly, how does the therapist responsible for verifying where that person actually is at the time? Because some people may not tell the truth.
I mean, they just have to make the best effort possible and make sure that they, for them is to document what they've been told. And then also, I guess, Roseanne, want to jump in there?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So it is in our telehealth regulations that a therapist, each time they provide services to each client, they need to verbally obtain from the client, then document their full name and address of present location at the beginning of the session. So that is how that is handled. Now, of course, I think that's about as far as it can go. We don't have like an address tracker on somebody, but they are supposed to obtain where that person is physically located should they need to call, for an emergency. That way they would have their location.
Wait, so they're not asking for their address, they're asking where are you located at this moment?
Yes, the address of present location. So when if I were to start a therapy session, client, where are you located today? What's the address of where you're at?
Okay, thank you.
Do that before or at the start of every telehealth session, Susan.
Yes, that is required in our telehealth regulations to do at the beginning of each telehealth session.
All right, thank you. Moderator, would you open up comments from the audience, please?
Certainly. We are opening up the WebEx Q&A feature to facilitate public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, you can click on the question mark icon, type the word comment into that text box and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, and audio participants can raise their hand by pressing *3. And we do have some requests for comment. Let me go ahead and try and go in order here. Our first was from Stephanie Gabler. Stephanie, I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak with a 15-second warning. And Stephanie, did you get the request? Okay, you're unmuted.
Hello, this is Stephanie Gabler, licensed MFT in California. I have it specifically done with my clients. I'm doing telehealth right now because my office had been closed during the pandemic currently. So all my clients know when we start right away. Once we begin, they state their name and location. And once you get going with them and they know that this is kind of what we regularly do, my clients are kind of trained now and they state their name, location. I say, okay, hi, so-and-so, where are you right? Let's begin. And they just automatically, I'm client so-and-so, I'm located blah, blah, blah. And I write in my notes, okay, client, we started session, client stated their name and location, which was their current residence, and then we started session, and then I write my notes, and that's it. So once you get going with clients, for me, I haven't had it be a problem, and I am aware that that is policy. So I think just spreading the word out there, I've been telling my colleagues also to do that. Once we get the word out there more, I haven't seen it as a problem since, all my friends were all still doing telehealth, and we're not back in our offices yet. So just wanted to say it's not a big deal, but once you kind of train the clients, it is pretty simple to do that. And they just state where they're located with and then obviously since I have their residence documented already, it's already documented where the residence is. So just wanted to state that it's pretty simple to acknowledge that. That's all. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And our next request for comment is from Ben Caldwell. Ben, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. You're unmuted.
Thank you, Ben Caldwell, MFT. Really appreciate the direction this has taken, Steve. I know we've discussed in previous committee meetings. There was some concern that the sort of earlier scope of this project was going to be too much and sort of create confusion potentially. So I appreciate the narrower scope here. I really like the form that these documents are in now. There's some copy editing stuff in there that I can address with you offline. Only two substantive issues here. The first is AAMFT has a best practices document for the online practice of couple and family therapy. I can send you a link for that. It would be nice to have that just included. And then I think it's in attachment C. Yeah, where you say providers that offer telehealth therapy in California must hold one of the following California licenses. Might be helpful there to say licenses or registrations, just to be clear that the associate registration is not in fact a license. And then my last comment is that while I think these are good, useful documents, part of the origin of this project was the lack of clarity in the regulation that says that providers need to follow best practices for security and confidentiality in the telehealth process. And I still think it would be helpful to try to bring some clarity to that particular regulation, because out of all the BBS telehealth statutes and regs, that is probably the one that people have the hardest time making meaning out of. They don't know whose best practices they're supposed to be looking at, or sort of what level of adherence to those best practices is sufficient. So while I think these documents
15 seconds.
are fantastic, I don't want to lose sight of that sort of origin of them in the process. Thank you very much.
Ben, I have a question on your comment, if you would hop back on your mic. So when you're talking about bringing clarity to the telehealth regulations, you're talking about that in a broad scope of taking another look at what our telehealth regulations are and making sure that they themselves are clear. Is that what
I'm talking? I appreciate the question, but I'm talking very specifically about the single regulation that requires clinicians to follow. And I think the language, Roseanne, you can correct me. It's actually, go ahead, Roseanne.
I think, let me clarify this with you, Ben. There is a portion in 1815.5, it's D3, if you're going to get technical. It says every time a person's a licensed provider services, they need to utilize industry best practices for telehealth to ensure both client confidentiality and security. So are you saying that what maybe have the documents more point to what we're referring to when we say utilize the industry best practices, that's confusing?
Well, I'm saying that, and I do want to get technical, so I appreciate you're going to that language, because that's what I'm referring to. So when we say best practices, I think there's confusion among clinicians about, okay, well, what do you mean by best practices? And linking to those best practices documents is helpful. But then, is it just that I need to look at those best practices documents every so often? Do I need to comply with half of the list of the ones from AAMFT? Is it okay if I'm an MFT and I'm looking at best practices that are put out by NASW? It's that particular question of, like, when you say adhere to industry best practices, like, what does that mean? And part of the issue too is that phrase best practices sometimes refers to more aspirational or ideal standards, and here through regulation we're making it the floor, we're making it a requirement. And so I think that creates confusion among licensees and registrants alike about, well, what does that actually look like to adhere to best practices in this context?
Ben? Other comments, moderator?
Yes, our next commenter is Kristen V. Kristen, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 2 minutes. You're unmuted.
And I just wanted to make a comment with regard to one very small specific thing that was said with the documents being presented in response to it, actually, which was the potential for there being a specific site or link on the BBS website that goes straight to the telehealth information. As somebody who is transitioning from in-person to telehealth, I've kind of had to do deep dives all over the place to try to find each little pocket of information. And it would be great to have this all just in that one place. So if there were a link on the BBS website that linked directly to these documents, that would have been super helpful for me 6 months ago. So putting my thought out there that I do think that that would be a great addition. Thank you.
Thank you.
And our next request for comment is from Kathy Atkins. Kathy, I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone. You're unmuted.
Hi, this is Kathy Atkins from CAMPT. Thank you for tackling this. I know it's not easy to do. Ben Caldwell testified about the best practices and definitions, and I think while we concur with that assessment, and I think this is a growing, moving, changing thing as we all learn more. And so hopefully this would get updated as, as things become norms. As to attachment A, the only comment I had was just if, assuming 232 passes, you might, the BBS might want to consider utilizing some of that language. Attachment B, I don't know if it's worth defining what video conferencing supervision is. Maybe yes, maybe no. My other comment is the question says, do I have the necessary HIPAA compliant software and hardware? While I think most of us would agree it's best practices, it's not, I don't believe it's absolutely required. And so we're wondering, would it be helpful to have something like utilizing industry best practices, being familiar with applicable California or HIPAA laws, or something along those lines. So something to consider. And then on attachment C, and I don't know if this is complicated given the vagueness of telehealth currently, but defining telehealth for the consumer. And sort of what was mentioned earlier, I don't know if you address or highlight trainees or pre-graduates
15 seconds
given they're doing telehealth, but I know they're not technically regulated by the BBS, so I know that's complicated. But again, just things to consider as you're marking this up. Thank you.
Kathy.
And we do not have any other requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
Any other comments from committee members? Kelly looks deep in thought. Susan, your hand's up.
I was just thinking. I was just thinking about Mr. Caldwell's comment on best practices, but I'm going to let Stephen then think about it. I think there are some best practices which are indeed aspirational, especially for rural therapists. But then there are also some best practices which are the norm. So it's a very good comment to think about.
Right, I think that's where the ethics come in. So yeah, I wonder if there's a way to link some of those. If we're looking at the different organizations definitions of what best practice is within their specific their specific practice, then I wonder if there's a way for us to create links to those documents. And Steve, maybe you can answer this, to give a direction as to what the different organizations call best practices or code of ethics and things like that with regards to telehealth. Steve, do you have a thought?
Oh yeah, and that's what we've kind of linked to actually in some of those. I'm looking, I can't remember right now, but I know that there was one of the organizations, I think it was NASW, might have, it was actually their best practices for telehealth, and so there are. We can actually maybe do more pointed for the association type of links that we have, more pointed links to the sections, but each one of those does have somewhat of a code of ethics or best practice, I think, within there. Might be minimal. Some actually go further as to have a whole thing on telehealth. So,
and what I would also wonder is, being that these are these are documents that we're putting out, they're not going to be bound in legislation. Can they become, living, breathing things where they're updated and changed as different things arise?
Oh yeah, and I mean I think that's what I would look at. Like any publication we put out, we would want to update them. Right now, the concept of where I put the links in, because that's where you usually get on a website, or if you're producing stuff out there with links, they could be gone the next day. So what I've tried to do is make the links as specific as possible without, trying to get them to, I guess, broad as possible, so it will direct the person to, the site where they can maybe search. But if because I don't want to get too specific on the links, because they'll get if it's too specific, those might get changed. But yeah, no, I think it's something that we could look at, and definitely, on a yearly basis, kind of make sure that the links are up, or if there's anything additional, maybe we can, put that in there also. So.
I think that's great. And just to kind of, go back to one of the comments from Kristen V. She was hoping that this information would have been on the, available 6 months ago. I think that that says a lot as to what our licensees, they're looking for direction. And, especially if those that are moving from in person to doing more telehealth, as we know that that's, that practice is just growing. So I think this is a really good start. So I'd make a motion to direct, Steve and staff to move forward with the process of putting this up on the website, and editing is needed, what is it, the non-substantial changes,
Non-substantial.
right? And getting this out to both licensees and the public.
I'll second.
Okay. Any other comments from committee, or nope, from moderator? Any comments from public about the motion?
We've opened up the Q&A for comments from the public on the motion. If you'd like to make a comment, you can look for the question mark icon, type the word comment and click send, or anyone may raise their hand to ask to be recognized, and call-in users can press *3 to raise their hand. We have a request to comment from someone logged in as Michael Levy. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 2 minutes. You're unmuted.
Appreciate the hard work that has gone into these documents and the intention to provide high quality services under our licenses to the public in California. It strikes me as we discuss this proposal that I'm not familiar with the history of the Board of Behavioral Sciences publishing best practices documents or recommendations. I do believe that some of the technical issues that differentiate some aspects of telehealth therapy and services are important to address and clarify. But I think we may be not being fully cognizant of the many other critical elements of telehealth best practices when it comes to clinical practice and managing crises and risk and well-being for our clients. And so I just want to raise the question for the board and interested parties to consider what are the parameters? What are the appropriate parameters of the board's responsibility in providing public safety, and is this the appropriate forum to try to further best practices, clinical best practices, as we provide services to the public in the best way?
15 seconds.
So again, the question is, to what extent is this really appropriate for the board? And are there other measures through the associations and so forth and continuing education that we may be
2
able to
minutes.
better
And I do not see any other requests for public comment. Shall I close the comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
All right, any other discussion from committee members?
Yes. I'm happy to address that last comment as a telehealth committee member. Historically, when professional industries have policed their own, they have done so at the exploitation and safety of consumers of those professional industries. That is very historical. The board's duty and the telehealth committee's duty is always and shall always be public safety as paramount. So this is entirely appropriate for both the board to do, particularly when it comes to the safety of consumers in the state of California. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it. Christina, would you please take the roll call vote?
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Chris Jones,
Yes.
Kelly Ronasinghe,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you, Christina. Next on the agenda is suggestions for future agenda items. Agenda item number 8. This is the chance to suggest topics to be included in future board or committee meeting discussions. Do any of the committee members have additional agenda items for the future board or committee meetings? Susan?
Well, based on what I said before, when I went before the Senate Rules Committee and they asked, or somebody popped in at the last minute and asked, what about chatbot and AI? And it is possible for a person to decide that they want to use chatbot as their therapist. And I have no idea, since the Congress seems to have no idea, and I'm either, how we would deal with this question, to be quite honest with you. But I just thought I should mention it because they're going to ask again somebody, and I think we need to say, yes, we've discussed it, and we're the same as the Congress. We have no idea. Anyway, I do know a lawyer that I know, a judge that I know rather, mentioned to me that somebody who was appealing a case in her court said that his attorney was of record, was chatbot. So he was using chatbot as his attorney. I think if somebody's trying, I mean, they're going to deny it, of course, but I don't know if we need to have any kind of a proposal or something, recommendation about chatbot.
So Susan, are you asking as a future agenda item to investigate the usage of AI or chatbot within therapy?
What I'm asking is that maybe we should have a discussion about it at our next meeting about, I mean, I don't know anything more about it.
Okay.
But I do know that, there are some people who may want to test the waters and decide, okay, chatbot's going to be, it's very hard to get a therapist and it's very expensive. I'm going to use it, chatbot.
I don't know that we can regulate AI, but we can definitely have a discussion about it. I think
we will take note, and I think with as naturally as our conversation goes along with the survey and stuff, that will come into play. So we definitely will. Staff will make note, and we'll highlight that within that. So
thank you, Susan. Kelly?
I think you framed it the way I was going to frame it, because there are certain AI apps that people use, and sometimes they can they can devolve into mental health-ish discussions, and that's a concern that is being raised, in some chatter. But I'm fine with the discussion.
Okay, and back in my notes for a second. No, I think I'm curious. Maybe it is a discussion and a discussion item about looking at and please tell me if this is appropriate, Steve. We've had the comment about best practices come up a couple of times today. With regards specifically to telehealth, I don't know if that falls within our purview is what is best practice. But I at some point I think want to review the what the regulations are with regards to practicing telehealth and make sure that they're up to date with with just the surge that we've had and making sure that it covers all of the bases. The regulations cover all of the things that are coming around as this practice is evolving. That'd be all right?
That is definitely within our purview, is looking at current regulations and statutes that we have to make sure. And that's what we're kind of been doing. But I think within light what you're talking about with the best practices and stuff, we can definitely you're the chairperson, so let's talk and plan how we're going to bring that. So
yeah, maybe that's something we can define better offline.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Any moderator, will you open up the line for discussion from our audience?
Exactly. And we've opened up the WebEx Q&A to facilitate public comment. If anyone would like to make a comment, you can look for the question mark icon, type comment in the text box and click send, or anyone may raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon. We do have some requests or some suggestions of future agenda topics. Going in order, Sherry, I'm going to send you a request to unmute. And keep in mind, this is for suggestions of future meeting topics. You're unmuted. Sherry?
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. This is related to the future topic that's already been proposed. I think that the chatbot or AI, the way I see it as tying in, is having, let's say, a therapist use AI to deliver their messages and how ethical that is or is not. For example, if I want to write a web page or something like that, I can just go to AI and have AI tell me what I should say. I wouldn't doubt if there are some folks out there who would use technology to decide what they're going to say as opposed to providing personalized services.
And is that the conclusion of your suggestion?
I'm just wondering if that's ethical, if you would consider that ethical and where you would cut that off at, and if I agree with the previous comments that if it's not addressed in some type of way, it could become an issue down the line. That's my end. That's the end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
And our next request for comment is from someone logged in as Elijah Hooks. Elijah, I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone, and you'll have 2 minutes. You're unmuted.
My name's Elijah Hooks. Very nice to be here today.
Your voice is very quiet. Can you project a little more?
Oh, can you hear me just
Much
fine
better.
now? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's very nice to be here today. My wife and I actually just moved out here to this admittedly beautiful state of California, all the way out from the great state of Oklahoma back in October, actually. And that's because she was stationed out at Travis Air Force Base. And so I would like to propose an accommodation for out-of-state AMFT applicants who are also military spouses. So far, I've had little success in sorting out my seemingly unique situation with the BBS because I come from a university whose graduate MFT program is just 2 units short of meeting the 48 semester unit minimum required to remediate while in an AMFT internship. I understand so far, based on correspondence with the AMFT support line via email, that once a degree has been conferred, it cannot be remediated. However, I would like to ask for reconsideration of section 4980.78, item 1B, to add an exception regarding military spouses like myself who have no control over where they're stationed or are now prevented unintentionally from pursuing a meaningful career as a family and mental health clinician. Furthermore, I'm currently employed with Pacific Clinics working on the mobile crisis team as a family specialist, but we're actually on pause at the moment due to an insufficient number of clinicians, leaving the entirety of Solano County's community at a disadvantage.
15 seconds.
An accommodation from the BBS over my situation would benefit not just my career, but also my community, as well as other aspiring military spouse clinicians.
And your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Elijah.
And I do not see any other requests for comment at this time. Oh, my apologies. We do have some participation through our Q&A panel. I'm going to send each person the request to unmute themselves so they can present their idea. First is Sharon Swarterly. And Sharon, I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone. You're unmuted.
And
Go
I
ahead.
am a senior licensing manager of telehealth licensing for a West Coast teletherapy practice. And I would like a future agenda item to be the Social Work Licensure Compact, which is now available for states to review and adopt as a future pathway for social work licensure.
Thank you for your suggestion. And our next commenter is Michael Levy. And Michael, if you'd like to affirm your support of an earlier suggestion, you're welcome to. I've sent your request to unmute. You're unmuted.
Thank you. And I did just want to reiterate, the question was raised by one of the committee members, I believe, about the use of text or chat for providing psychotherapy services. And I think that is a worthwhile topic for a future agenda item.
Thank you. And our next request for comment comes from Isa Ribido. Isa, I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. You'll have 2 minutes. You're unmuted.
And thank you for this opportunity to speak. My request is simply a conversation for future discussion about the role of academic institutions in preparing therapists of the future, specific to telehealth and the growth of telehealth. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next request for comment is from Jerry Grossman. Jerry, I'm sending you a request to unmute, and you'll have 2 minutes. And Jerry, did you see a pop-up saying unmute me? And you're unmuted. But Jerry, we're not hearing your voice. And I'll defer to Chair Jones. Is it okay if Jerry Grossman types his comment into the text box?
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay, Jerry, it looks like your microphone is maybe not working. And oh, Jerry's comment is his suggestion for future agenda item, national licenses. Aside from that, there are no further requests for public comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
That moves us on to our next agenda item, which is public comment for items that are not on the agenda, agenda item number 9. As a reminder, the board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Any comments from the public, moderator?
And this is the moderator. As a reminder of the process, if you'd like to make a comment, you can either click on the question mark icon, type the word comment in the text box and click send, or you may raise your hand. And this agenda item is items that were not listed on the agenda. Are there any requests for comment? And Jerry Grossman has requested comment. Let's give it a try and see if you can get your microphone working this time, Jerry. I sent you a request to unmute. Okay, you're unmuted. I'm afraid we're still not hearing your voice. And we're displaying some instructions on audio troubleshooting. If you pull down the little arrow next to the unmute mute button. And again, Jerry, your other option is to type your comment into the text box. And I do not see any other requests from anyone else. All right, Jerry's, oh, we do have a comment from Michael Levy. And so, Michael, I am going to send you a request to unmute your microphone and present your suggestion for items that were not on this agenda.
Thank you. Please forgive me if this has been addressed in prior meetings, and go ahead and shut me down if it has. I've not been able to attend every committee meeting. I am aware in many instances, however, that the laws and regulations regarding telehealth have been confusing to many consumers and practitioners when it comes to questions such as perhaps a road warrior salesperson who has to travel frequently out of state, or a flight attendant, or airline flight crews who are not regularly in their home state but may need therapy and want to take advantage of telehealth. I would just think it would be a worthwhile discussion to try to create some clarity in California regulation and law and practice as to when a person is considered a California resident, and clarification of laws regarding legal residence versus current location when it comes to being defined as a California consumer and under the protection of the California Department of Consumer Affairs. perhaps when temporarily out of state.
All right. And thank you for that. We have a request for comment from Jen. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone so you can bring up your topic. And Jen, did you get the request to unmute your microphone? All right, so Chair Jones, following the precedent of reading out what's the person has typed in the box, Jen's suggestion for a future agenda item, the need for supervising via tele is crucial in rural communities.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then Jerry Grossman did have an opportunity to type her question. There are two of them. The first is concerning the display of the license in this legislative session. Was there a sponsor? And the second question was, is there any particular timeline predicted for the release of the survey? And there are no further requests for public comment.
Thank you.
Shall I close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you, moderator.
You're welcome.
No, Roseanne, are you allowed to answer those questions?
Roseanne, you're muted. Oh.
Still muted. Steve, are you allowed to answer those
Well,
questions?
so the two questions I can answer just because they're real quick. We don't have any sponsored legislation yet. We're going through the process for the display of license, looking at that. Additionally, for the survey, it'll come out, I would hope, in the next month or so. We're going to be putting it out there.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, our next agenda item is adjournment. I would like to thank everybody for participating today. It was a great meeting. The time is 10:48 a.m. and we will see you at our next meeting. Thank you so much.